A tavern is a place of business where people gather to drink alcoholic beverages and be served food, and in most cases, where travelers receive lodging. An inn is a tavern which has a license to put up guests as lodgers. The word derives from the Latin taberna, whose original meaning was a shed, workshop, stall, or pub. In the English language, a tavern was once an establishment which served wine whilst an inn served beer and ale. Over time, the words tavern and inn became interchangeable and synonymous. In England, inns started to be referred to as public houses or pubs, and the term became standard for all drinking houses. Australia. Wowser was a negative term for Christian moralists in Australia, especially activists in temperance groups such as the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Historian Stuart McIntyre argues, the achievements of the Wowsers were impressive. They passed laws that restricted obscenity and juvenile smoking, raised the age of consent, limited gambling, closed down many pubs, and in 1915-16 established a 6 p.m. closing hour for pubs, which lasted for decades. France. Until the late 18th century, the only places for common people to eat out were inns and taverns. After 1500, taxes on wine and other alcoholic beverages grew increasingly more burdensome, not only because of the continual increase in the level of taxation, but also because of the bewildering variety and multiplicity of the taxes. This chaotic system was enforced by an army of tax collectors. The resultant opposition took many forms. Wine growers and tavern keepers concealed wine and falsified their methods of selling it to take advantage of lower tax rates. The retailers also engaged in clandestine refilling of casks from hidden stocks. Wine merchants stealthily circumvented inspection stations to avoid local import duties. When apprehended, some defrauders reacted with passive resignation, while others resorted to violence. Situated at the heart of the country town or village, the tavern was one of the traditional centres of social and political life before 1789, a meeting place for both the local population and travellers passing through, and a refuge for rogues and scoundrels. Taverns symbolised opposition to the regime and to religion. Taverns sometimes served as restaurants. In 1765 in Paris was founded the first restaurant in the modern sense of the term. However, the first Parisian restaurant worthy of the name was the one founded by Beauvilliers in 1782 in the Rue de Richelieu, called the Grande Taverne de Londres. Émile Zola's novel L'Assommoir, The Tavern, depicted the social conditions typical of alcoholism in Paris among the working classes. The drunk destroyed not only his own body, but also his employment, his family, and other interpersonal relationships. The characters Gervaise McCourt and her husband Coupeau exemplified with great realism the physical and moral degradation of alcoholics. Zola's correspondence with physicians reveal he used authentic medical sources for his realistic depictions in the novel. Germany. A common German name for German taverns or pubs is Kneipe. Drinking practices in 16th century Augsburg, Germany, suggest that the use of alcohol in early modern Germany followed carefully structured cultural norms. Drinking was not a sign of insecurity and disorder. It helped define and enhance men's social status and was therefore tolerated among men as long as they lived up to both the rules and norms of tavern society and the demands of their role as householder. Tavern doors were closed to respectable women unaccompanied by their husbands, and society condemned drunkenness among women. But when alcohol abuse interfered with the household, women could deploy public power to impose limits on men's drinking behavior. Great Britain. Taverns were popular places used for business as well as for eating and drinking. The London Tavern was a notable meeting place in the 18th and 19th centuries. For example. However, the word tavern is no longer in popular use in the UK as there is no distinction between a tavern and an inn. Both establishments serve wine and beer, ale. The term pub is now used to describe these houses. The legacy of taverns and inns is now only found in the pub names, e.g., Fitzroy Tavern, Silver Cross Tavern, Spaniards Inn, etc. The word also survives in songs such as, "There is a tavern in the town." The range and quality of pubs varies wildly throughout the UK, as does the range of beers, wines, spirits and foods available. Most quality pubs will still serve cask ales and good food. In recent years there has been a move towards gastro pubs where the food is of excellent quality. Taverns served as a rest stops about every 15 miles, and their main focus was to provide shelter to anyone who was travelling at the time. Those who stayed would often be woken up at night due to some stranger who was staying the night beside you. They would be divided into two major parts: the sleeping quarters and the bar. There is more than likely a sign with a circle with some type of symbol to draw in customers. The purpose of this in England was to tell you that this establishment sells alcohol, and the symbol is to set themselves apart from the rest of their competition. We see that mainly men are allowed into this establishment, and that women were not really allowed in places like these unless they were with their husband or family. In England, if you were in a tavern and single, you would more than likely be seen as a prostitute through the eyes of the public. The taverns were used mainly for social gathering experience where everyone comes together to talk. In England, though, we see that social class has a role in all taverns, and that even though it is a social place for everyone, we start to see separation of social class in the England taverns. Pubs are still popular meeting places, but they are declining in popularity. This is attributed to economic conditions, the narrow profit margins permitted to pub landlords by brewing companies, the inexpensive sales of alcohol in supermarkets, and the banning of smoking in public places. Mexico. Reformers who denounced the terrible effects of heavy consumption of alcohol on public disorder, health, and quality of work made periodic attempts to control it in Mexico City in the late 18th century and early 19th century. The poor frequented the pulp areas where pulp, made from the maguey plant, was sold. After the legalization of the more potent aguardiente in 1796, the poor could also afford the vinaterias where hard liquor was served, and drunkenness increased. The taverns played an important social and recreational role in the lives of the poor. Influential citizens often owned the pulch areas and opposed reform, as did owners of the maguey haciendas. Tax revenues from alcohol were important to the government. These factors, added to lax enforcement of the laws, resulted in the failure of tavern reform.